Hello, my friends. As you know, Pembok 7 is now the talk of the town because the last man standing is down. What am I saying? I'm saying the CAPM exam that was standing as being the 6th edition referenced exam is now going out on the 25th of July. It's all going to be Pembok 7 in the dialogue, even though there's process groups, a practice guide that's still around, but a lot of focus is now on Pembok 7. So I have with me today my friends from the Project Leadership Institute, Daryl and Ed, who are PMPs, and we're just going to examine this from a very agnostic perspective, not thinking predictively only or agile only. We're going to just look at this as stuff that can help us. And instead of just focusing on the domains and the principles, we wanted to focus on the big mass of the 7th edition and what it stands for. So without separating domains and principles, just the big philosophy of the 7th edition is you got to be agnostic. That's what this book is saying. You know, it's just saying you got to be agnostic. You got to be flexible and don't bucketize yourself into I'm predictive only or I'm agile only. I would say this is the hybrid Pembok, if you will. Now, in order to hybridize, I know what the PMI wanted to do. They wanted to make a recipe that hasn't been shared before and something that would truly cover both worlds. However, I think they had already done that, to be honest, in the Agile Practice Guide, pages 90 to 95 of the Agile Practice Guide. They just didn't know. But Daryl, let's jump in. Ed, let's jump in and let me ask you, when you see this, what comes to your mind? Do you want to go first, Ed? Just tell me, just vanilla flavored, straight ahead slab of content. Don't look at this like anything, but just tell me what comes to your mind when you look at this.
You know, when I look at that, Phil, I think the first thing that arrests my attention, and I think is really what Chris Williams says. He says what separates people is not the skill, it's the patience in acquiring the skill and retaining the skill. And I think when you look at this, it's the opportunity to retain the skill set of learning what a stakeholder is and how the team can collaborate together. But based on what I'm seeing here is really all the drivers that can lead a project more effectively. You see, I said lead, not manage.
I like that. I like that. I actually love that. Everything rises and falls on leadership. You're very correct. That's a great way of looking at it. Awesome. Daryl, what do you think?
So in my opinion, Phil and Edward, it's more tailored to performance, which EVM stands out looking at that chart with performance, along with planning, project work, and it's more correlated around project controls.
That's a great way of looking at it. And you're very correct. Actually, one of my favorites, now that you mention it, Daryl, from all of these is the one at 9 o'clock here, this one, measurement. This is my favorite. And it's funny that EVM, for those who don't know, it stands for Earned Value Management. EVM is very heavily measurement focused. But I like the mantra here. Maybe a different day we'll talk about this. Or I might find myself on a rabbit trail borrowing for more information about measurement. It's really nice. But I'll give you the summary about all of these. And then when we get to measurement, maybe I'll drop some more gold. So stakeholder, right? Let's take a look at what PMI says. And you tell me if you concur with what is here. It says, the stakeholder performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with stakeholders. Effective stakeholder interaction contributes to successful project outcomes. Stakeholder engagement includes implementing strategies and actions to promote productive involvement of stakeholders in project decision-making and implementation. Quite straightforward. Wouldn't you agree, gents?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Bill.
And what does this remind you of from previous Pembok guides?
Constantly interaction. Stakeholder, I mean, that's the root of everything. In my opinion, just the constantly interaction with stakeholders, because without them, the project is not going to move anywhere.
Absolutely. And Daryl, what do you notice? Do you see this being a pull out of any of the chapters from the previous editions?
The stakeholder cube.
Yeah, the stakeholder, that whole stakeholder thing for sure. So that is chapter 13. So it's kind of covered in some way. Let's move to the next one, team. Let's see what this one says. It says, the team performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with the people who are responsible for producing project deliverables that realize business outcomes. Someone asked me yesterday, what's the difference between a stakeholder and a customer? And I said, oh, by the way, team members are also stakeholders. We just don't look at them as stakeholders all the time, but they really are. So this is kind of like an extension. It's still people who can affect the project, but these are the ones responsible for producing project deliverables that realize business outcomes. It says the project team is a set of individuals performing the work for the project to achieve its objectives. An environment can be established to support the team in evolving to a high performance team. So let me ask you guys this, Ed, how would you get your team to be a high performance team? Maybe in just one or two sentences, what would you do?
To get the team to be a high performance team, I would take time to invest and find out what are the gaps between them and the project itself. And that would just take interviewing with them, meeting with them one-on-one instead of a group setting.
Brilliant, brilliant. Daryl, what would you do?
The term servant leader stands out for me, Phil. You always have to be part of that leader, not only as a manager, but be that leader to learn and understand your team.
Brilliant stuff, folks. Let's see the last pieces that PMI has here. It says the development approach and delivery cadence influence the project lifecycle and its phases. So the build up from there is they're saying the deliverables and the development approach influence the number and cadence for project deliveries. So this is where we're seeing the team as being a powerful force. You see, the team in this next one. So here we finished talking about the team, but when it gets to the development approach and life cycle, this is where the team needs to be given some more power, because it's not just the project manager in isolation deciding upon the development approach and life cycle. This is where you're going to bring more people to the table in the form of the team. So if you notice, it's kind of like a buildup. So we have a general concept of stakeholders. Then we understand that the team is a subset of the stakeholders. Then we are talking about the development approach. And this is where the team comes in, because this shouldn't be a one man or one woman affair when one person decides the development approach. So are we going to do this project in a predictive way or in an agile way or hybrid way? This now comes into the conversation. And in the last paragraph here, it says, the project deliverables determine the most appropriate development approach. But beyond the deliverables, you also need to include the humans. Well, won't you agree that humans should have a say? It's not just automatic, you know.
I agree, Phil. I think humans should play a part into it. I think the best concept that I've ever heard when it comes to leading a team is you need to get buy-in. In order to get buy-in, you need to be able to have their ideals combined with the direction you're going, because people only want to work with you if they feel like they're respected and appreciated. They'll go further than if you're just being directive and saying, just like what you were saying, a project manager and being siloed and saying, this is what we're doing, and being more directive instead of taking a step back of the whole team of saying, we're going to be collaborative, we're going to work together, we're going to identify the framework and of how we're going to move with regards to being predictive, adaptive, or hybrid approach. And if we're running a predictive project and we find out it's not effective enough, can we have the courage and be leaders and say, this is not working, and raise our hand and say, we need to pivot and make a change.
Absolutely, Ed. I love it. Good deal. Daryl, what do you think about the development approach and involving people in this decision?
I feel that it opens up the dialogue from being black and white,
Mm.
especially when it comes to project controls and earned value management. Um, Once you're that EV guy or you're labeled an EV guy, you're considered taboo. But having to step outside the box and thinking outside the box, it will help in many ways.
Very, very true. I've been there. I've been there. I see how people look at my earned value posts. This guy, I thought he was getting agile. What's wrong with him? It's talking earned value again. Oh dear. People don't get it. Anyway, that's a different topic.
Hey Phil, isn't that so funny too when you think about it? Is that when you start your journey off, is that people put you in a box, and that's
Mm.
sometimes I think with project management we can get so caught up in the box. At that time, that wasn't effective, but now the box has changed because watch this, Phil. The contents in the box are not the same anymore. So
Mm.
because the contents in the box is not the same, it's time to make an adjustment and figure out what we need to do to address what the contents are in the box.
It's so true. Absolutely. That's the dynamic life of a project manager. That's what it should be like. You bring up a great point. I love that analogy. Good deal. All right, let's go to this one and let's get to the punchline. And it says, planning organizes, elaborates, and coordinates work throughout the project. Planning takes place upfront and throughout the project. The amount, timing, and frequency varies depending on the product, development approach. There we go with development approach, environment, and stakeholders. So the thread is when you know the development approach, then you know how you're going to plan. Is it going to be like a sprint planning, or is it going to be full on back-to-back planning from the beginning to the end and making adjustments, very little adjustments to scope in a more predictive environment? That needs to come up. So planning is quite straightforward. You folks remember planning is a process group. So all the things that came under the planning process group, that's what this is talking about. So it says the planning performance domain addresses the activities and functions associated with the initial, ongoing, and evolving organization and coordination necessary for delivering project deliverables and outcomes. This one's quite straightforward, right? Planning is planning. Would you agree? What do you think?
Absolutely. And if you fail to plan, and you plan to fail. So
Absolutely, Phil. And just to shed some light, especially with the performance domains, Phil, it's talking more about synergy in regards to the domains that you have up on your screen.
Yeah, everything needs to be synergized for the maximum effect.
yeah.
So it says the amount, timing, and frequency varies depending on the product, development approach, environment, and, a note to PMI, because I know you watch my videos. When you're rewriting this, you need to put stakeholders first. It's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And I think Daryl hit the nail on the head. It's really about the synergy. And who does a synergy come from? It's just stakeholders. So, the amount, timing, and frequency depends on the stakeholders. You could have the product telling you this needs to be a more adaptive approach, and you could have the stakeholders saying, no, we don't like adaptive. At the end of the day, it still boils down to the stakeholders. So that's a very good point, Daryl. It's all about the synergy, and that's a great way of looking at it as well. All right. Project work performance domain, it gets a little bit, this is where it can get muddy for people because of how it's worded. So it says the project work performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with establishing project processes. So you start thinking in a knowledge area way and see where you end up. Establishing project processes, that's integration. Managing physical resources, that is control resources as a process. And fostering a learning environment, that's manage project knowledge. So in this project work performance domain, you might as well think about a lot of the executing process group in different ways, right? It says project work is associated, I'll make it bigger so that we can read it properly. Project work is associated with establishing the processes and performing the work to enable the project team to deliver the expected value and outcomes. I like this language because the PMI have realized it's not about delivering the deliverable, it's about value and outcomes. And I know the alarm bell is going off in Daryl's head because he's seen the word value and thinking earned value as well. And it's true, whatever the value is, but you got to remember the definition of earned value. It's the budgeted cost of work performed. And you want the earned value to match your actual cost. Why would you want to spend more than what you got? So this is another place that you can see that, you know, if you like earned value bend, but beyond the earned value, the outcomes are also important. So this is where you're looking at the end of the project and saying, did it really move me from my current state to my future state? All right, let me move on because I digress. Any comments on project work? Anything come to mind, folks?
I think you nailed that really well, Phil.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Delivery. This is one you're very familiar with because you've worked in areas where delivery is important. And it says it addresses activities and functions associated with delivering scope and quality. So scope and quality that the project was undertaken to achieve. In the world of Agile, we got to be careful, right? When we say delivering the scope that the project was undertaken to achieve. It's very subjective in Agile because scope is dynamic. We don't fix our scope down. Quality, fitness for use, conformance to requirements, customer satisfaction, Kaizen. Yeah, you should be thinking about this. But it says project support, strategy execution, and advancing business objectives. I'm going to get to the punchline. It says business value often continues to be captured long after the project has ended. So yes, you may deliver the scope and the quality, but the outcome, we want to see those benefits that we set out to achieve actually being realized. Does this concept make sense? What are your first impressions?
You know, Phil, I think when I think about delivery, I always, you know, I think about quality as well. And as it talks about meeting the requirements of the scope, sometimes, as we know, those terms of scope creep and gold plating, where we want to build out something besides of what the customer is really truly asking for. You can fall guilty to that because of maybe what you experience and what you're seeing as you're building this particular project up. But at the end of the day, I think you need to ensure that you're delivering on what the scope is and addressing and making sure that the quality is good, and then the product will speak for itself.
That's a great way of looking at it. Thank you for that. Daryl, any thoughts?
For me, Phil, Agile and Scrum sticks out to me because in today's day and age, technology is forever growing, and Agile can play a huge part in this domain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're very correct. The delivery cadence is very important to talk about because it could be delivered in several increments, several iterations, or it might just be delivered one time. And it's, again, a nice place to talk about the Agile Practice Guide, pages 18 and 19, that clarify the different ways you can deliver. You'd either deliver predictively in an iterative way, which is many cycles, but only one delivery, incrementally, which is delivering several smaller increments, or Agile, several small increments. So right on the money with that, Daryl. Let's move on to the measurement performance domain. I love this performance domain because a lot of people on projects find themselves with useless KPIs. You know, the 7th edition calls them vanity metrics. They're just measuring stuff that may look good on paper, but it does nothing for you. It is valueless. And we don't want to get into that habit. Case in point, my buddy Roy always talks about this company he was affiliated with, and management said, oh, we want the metric of how many defects you find, test team. So guess what? The test team was being given bonuses if they found a whole boatload of defects and bugs. So what happened? The KPI generated bad behaviors. So what happened was the developers were now in cahoots with the testers. So the developers intentionally created some defects, not anything that would absolutely rock the boat, but enough to make the testers look good. So there were a lot of planted defects that the testers were finding, and they were getting bonuses based on being in cahoots with the developers because they're their buddies and they want them to get the bonuses and to look good. That's a bad metric. And a bad metric to use for rewarding the team. So in PMBOK 7, the idea is be careful what you measure, because if you're measuring nonsense, you could be generating bad behaviors and maybe not helping yourself, shooting yourself in the foot. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what is your first impression? Just reading this first section with me, the measurement performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with assessing project performance and taking appropriate action to maintain acceptable performance. First impressions.
That's a great question, Phil. I mean, there's so much to unpack here, and I know you're going to do it. So, but I really think it reminds me of just status reports and how that as you mentioned, that vanity of KPIs that hold no value. It doesn't address the outcome of what we're looking to get out of why we're doing this project. It's just addressing the results. And the results, even though they're good, they still are not what the end customer wants. They want the outcome. Outcome being, when you finish this widget, I'll be able to take this widget and do X, Y, and Z with it with my organization. So being able to have true measurements of where we are and where we're going is always going to be key.
Good stuff. Thank you, Ed. Daryl, any thoughts?
The way I see this domain, Phil, is plan value, actual cost, and earn value, where you always express that earn value is king.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good deal. Thank you. Let me just take us down. I promise I'm not going to get on a rabbit trail. I promise. I will be brief. But I got to show you my favorite page in this book. It's page 112, where we begin talking about measurement pitfalls. And this is for all my friends in companies. You know, you got your pretty little KPIs and your dashboards and your scorecards. Let's have an honest conversation about measurements. It says project measures help the project team meet the project objectives. However, there are some pitfalls associated with measurement. Awareness of these pitfalls can help minimize their negative effect. So let me walk you through them. Number one is the Hawthorne effect. And the Hawthorne effect states that the very act of measuring something influences behavior. Remember my story about those developers in cahoots with the testers? Why was that? The Hawthorne effect. Therefore, take care in establishing metrics. For example, measuring only a project team's output of deliverables can encourage the team to focus on creating a large volume of deliverables rather than focusing on deliverables that would provide higher customer satisfaction. The next one is a vanity metric I talked about. A vanity metric is a measure that shows data but does not provide useful information. I'm sorry to say, a lot of teams, they got vanity metrics. It looks good. Management, oh yeah, they're keeping track. That's garbage. You got to make sure that whatever you're measuring is important. Measuring page views of a website, for example, is not as useful as measuring the number of viewers. The number of new viewers, rather. If you're just measuring page views, how do you know that it wasn't the same person viewing 1,000 times? You know, that's kind of the argument that the 7th edition is making here. Next one is demoralization. If measures and goals are set that are not achievable, project teams' morale may fall as they continuously fail to meet targets. So there's such a thing as stretch goals. Yes, yes, yes. But people also want to see their hard work recognized. And if they're never attaining it, it's not going to be recognized. So you got to beware. Another pitfall is misusing the metric. Let me just tell you one of the one I hate the most it's using velocity as a measure of team performance. It's foolish. We don't do that when we are mindful in the world of Agile. That is not a good way of measuring, because you do know that velocity is a factor of many different things. One being capacity, another one being the general complexity of the content that you just got done trying to work on for that sprint. So don't get sucked into misusing the metrics. It says, regardless of the metrics used to measure performance, there is the opportunity for people to distort the measurement or focus on the wrong thing, focusing on less important metrics rather than the metrics that matter the most, focusing on performing well for the short-term measures at the expense of long-term metrics, working on out-of-sequence activities that are easy to accomplish in order to improve performance indicator. You see, you can always game the system, which is why when people say, oh, we want to use velocity as a measure, I'm like, don't be dumb. The team's just going to hike up their story points and make the story points worth a lot more if they know that you're measuring them based on velocity. It's dumb. Don't do it. The next one is confirmation bias. As humans, we tend to look for and see information that supports our pre-existing point of view. This can lead us to false interpretations of data. The final one is correlation versus causation. This one is a common mistake in interpreting measurement data. It's confusing the correlation of two variables with the idea that one causes the other. For example, seeing projects that are behind schedule and over budget might infer that projects that are over budget cause schedule issues. This is not true, nor is it true that projects that are behind schedule cause budget overruns. Instead, there are likely other correlating factors that are not being considered, such as skill in estimating, the ability to manage change, and actively managing risk. So since we talked so much about performance in this one, I'm going to ask Daryl, because I know he's very fond of the unvalued topic. So based on all this stuff I've said, what are some ideas? Because I know you're the ideas guy. What idea came into your head, Daryl?
Garbage in and garbage out is very important when it comes to performing that type of measurement in any project.
I love that. I think I'm going to borrow that. You got a garbage KPI, no matter what you do, it's going to be garbage out. You're so correct, Daryl. I love it. I love it. You want to make sure that you put in the right measurement or the right information, not just any old information. And this is why people demonize earned value. They put in garbage, or they are already thinking of gaming the system, and therefore they see it as being useless, which is wrong. Good deal. Good deal. Thank you. Ed, what came to mind as we went through this?
I really like the way Daryl summed it up, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, it's really one of those things. You can't even add any more coals to stoke the fire anymore, because you guys nailed it with that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, here's our final one. It's uncertainty. And the uncertainty performance domain, it addresses activities and functions associated with risk and uncertainty. Projects exist in environments with varying degrees of uncertainty, and uncertainty presents threats and opportunities that project teams explore and assess and then decide how to handle. Uncertainty, in the broadest sense, is a state of not knowing or unpredictability. There are many nuances to uncertainty, such as risk associated with not knowing future events, ambiguity associated with not being aware of current or future conditions, complexity associated with dynamic systems, with unpredictable outcomes, and many others. So when you think about uncertainty, think about risk, but don't just think about the negative, think about positive risks and how to harness them. ChatGPT is an example of a positive risk. This time last year, who even knew the word GP? What's that? But back in the United Kingdom, the only GP we know is a general practitioner that sees you for health reasons. Now we got a new GP, it's GPT, and it really transforms. The T is for transforming, because it transforms lives. So if you were in a state of doubt about whether AI is going to affect the world, and you were in that uncertain state, Well, now we're more certain. But a lot of people, they remain uncertain about technology and the future because they choose to. We don't want to be like that. Let me show you one more time what the PMI is saying your mindset needs to be. Address activities and functions associated with risk and uncertainty. AI is one, but you got to capitalize on the opportunity. I'm just using this as an example. There's no mention of GPT in this article, okay? It says, there are many nuances to uncertainty, such as risk associated with not knowing future events, ambiguity with not being aware of current or future conditions, complexity associated with dynamic systems with unpredictable outcomes, and many others. So for this, I would just encourage every project manager to jump aboard managing uncertainty, especially with technology and AI. You see how I smuggled that in there? Wasn't part of the agenda. What are your thoughts, Daryl?
I'm going to be completely transparent with you, Phil. It sounds like that this domain is really it touches you in many ways because of your project leadership course that me and Edward are in, and I feel that that's very important to you.
Thank you. Absolutely, that's true. Thank you, Daryl. You're right. You're right. Ed, what are your thoughts about the uncertainty domain?
You know what, Phil? This is one of my favorites, and you're probably saying, well, why is this one of your favorites? I'm glad you asked, because see, uncertainty, I want to remix this, Phil, if you don't mind, if we, take a step back. I will call this, are we there yet? And reason why I say that is because when I was growing up, before, we used to get on planes and automobiles. I'm not that old, but the whole point we used to take road trips. And me being young, I would always ask that question to my mother, Mama, are we there yet? And she was like, no, not yet, but we're close. And the uncertainty, which created the anxiety, because I was excited about where we're going. And when you look at that, when you correlate that to project management, and you're looking at as a project manager, there is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of risk and issues and things that come up. Yet along the journey, watch this, you have the opportunity to think about those things and put corrective actions in place, and just in case they do not happen. So the uncertainty really is what makes project managing so exciting, because you never know once you open up door number one what you're going to get. So I'll land with that. Thank you, Phil.
Wow, I love that. We need a video on that, Ed. Yes, Tom.
Phil, this also challenges project managers to learn about emotional intelligence, leadership for once, and also the ability to think outside the box when it comes to this domain. This really hits home for me, especially because I'm still growing as a project manager and trying to handle situations that you're not used to. It's really key to understanding yourself, understanding the knowledge that you have, and being able to be humble within yourself to not enforce, but influence in many ways you can think of when it comes to this domain.
I love it, gents. Thank you so much for your breakdowns. We're going to wrap this up now. For those of us who are already PMP certified, you're probably saying, okay, we got the domains. What else do I need to understand? Here's the map. The 6th edition had the 5 process groups, but the 7th edition has the principles. We've already looked at the principles. Be a good steward, get the team to synergize, collaborate with stakeholders, add value. If it's no value, don't do it. Think systemically, always see the big picture. Be a great leader, make the tough decisions, influence all the way positively, tailor according to your project, think about fitness for use, conforming to requirements and customer satisfaction, and Kaizen in quality. Break down the project into smaller pieces and manage complexity as you need to. Manage risk by optimizing the outcomes, optimize the risk response, be adaptable and resilient. I call it having bounce back ability, and be able to respond to change, help people in their transitioning to the future state of the firm. Those are the principles which have replaced the standard for project management. Now, when it comes to a guide to the project management body of knowledge in the sixth, all of those knowledge areas, which by the way, haven't gone, they're just not emphasized in the seventh. What has been emphasized is everything that we just went over. And those are the 8 domains. Now, someone says, but the 8 domains, it sounds like some of them are knowledge area. And I say, similar to what Daryl did, remember, these are about performance. I also like the word synergy. It's about how can we synergize in order to get optimum performance. A lot of what we had in the 6th edition is now in PMI Standards Plus, so it has not gone away. So someone says, okay, Phil, what is the big picture of all of this? If I wanted to compartmentalize my thoughts so that I can see everything in one map, this is how I see it. I call it the process group pentagon. You got 5 process groups. Those 5 process groups, we have all of these pieces: integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. That's the house that PMI built in the 6th edition. This is standing the test of time. It's not going away. Now, on top of this, we're going to bolster it with the 12 principles at the base. So you got to see it like this. You've got the 12 principles. You got the 10 knowledge areas. You got the 5 process groups. But if we wanted to add another layer of understanding on top of this, you could etch in each domain. So the stakeholder domain, the team domain, the planning domain, you could actually impose these on top to give an even clearer picture. And if you look at some of my videos on YouTube, you'll find where I have taken the domains and I have superimposed domains on top of these for clarity. So that's kind of how I see the world now of project management, with the 12 principles at the base. The performance domains, we could overlay them. You know, for example, the stakeholder domain, if you're going to talk about stakeholder domain, it's here, right? Stakeholder domain, it's there. You're going to talk about the team domain. Team domain is here, pretty much on top of the resources. If you're going to talk about planning domain, it's the entire planning process group in my mind, right? If you're going to talk about delivery performance domain falls here. It also falls here a little bit. You're going to talk about uncertainty domain. It falls there, and so on and so forth. You can talk about the measurement domain as being somewhere in the outskirts of monitoring and controlling, because that's where you actually do the measurements. And you can think of it as also touching a little bit of planning. So however you want to slice or dice it, project management hasn't changed, but the mindset has. We're now more aware of what we need to do to get to optimum performance. All right, my friends, any closing remarks from you, Ed, to close out on these thoughts?
You know, Phil, first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to show us this information, especially to the audience here, because of the shift, especially with regards to CAPM being changed on the 25th of July. We want to be cognizant and get ahead. And so getting ahead is being proactive. And what does proactive look like to me is planning and then following the path. So thank you for being committed to your craft field and not just interested.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Daryl, any final thoughts?
Phil, I share the same as what Ed was talking about. Also, I wanted to also influence EVM, and I can always tell that EVM is instilled in project managers because as far as what you're projecting, the Pentagon, if you go back and look at the history of the EVM was pioneered by the Air Force. So, you know, I do thank you for what you're doing, you know, as a as PM, and by nature you drew that out, just to show, everybody out there that EVM is behind the scenes when it comes to PMP.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, gents. And for those who don't know, both Daryl and Ed have channels on YouTube. We're going to put links to their channels below this video or to the side or above, wherever you find this posted. And I want you to check out their channels. And I want you to engage with them, as you may be able to locate them on LinkedIn. And they're both professionals. They're both leaders who mentor, train, and coach others. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. They get involved and they do stuff to help other people. So once again, thank you very much, gents. Influence, IPM, and Conscious Agility are the channels you want to look out for. I'm going to put them below. And if you've got any questions, make sure you reach out to them. Thank you very much. And we'll see you in another episode.